Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into the Greater Montreal area, the GMA, as we're, closing out 2025. And it's a city that seems to be, well, simultaneously booming and buckling. It's pouring billions into new transit, into densification, just betting big on the future. And yet, for so many people who actually live there, the pressure on just basic needs and affordability has never been higher. Our mission today is to try and reconcile that staggering disconnect. We've gathered sources on massive infrastructure budgets, record housing completions, but then right next to them are reports detailing spiking food insecurity and an almost existential crisis for the middle class. We're really looking for the why behind this split-screen reality.
And our sources point to three sort of core paradoxes shaping the city right now. First, you have the housing paradox. So officially, new rental supply is up, but somehow prices are just skyrocketing. Second, there's a planning paradox. How do you pull off these hyperdensity plans around new transit hubs like the RUM-M without completely destroying the quality of life, the green space that people love? And then the third, and I think this is maybe the most important, is the social paradox. The city's entire social safety net, the thing that keeps it all from fracturing, is basically propped up by this huge, almost completely invisible economy of unpaid care.
Let's jump straight into that first one with the data point that just seems to defy basic economics. We're looking at the official 2025 housing numbers. The availability of traditional rental housing actually increased this last year. So how can the vacancy rate go up? I mean, even approaching what they call equilibrium, while the average rent still jumps by a staggering 7.2%.
It's the central mystery, isn't it? And it really forces you to look beyond that top line number. So let's confirm the data. The latest SCHL report, that's the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, they confirmed that the traditional rental vacancy rate, what's called the taux d'inoccupation, it did rise to 2.9%.
Okay, 2.9%. So that's bumping right up against that 3% threshold, which is supposed to mean a healthy market, right?
Exactly. It usually means a market is stabilizing. But despite that signal, the average two-bedroom rent, well, it didn't stabilize at all. It jumped 7.2%, landing at $13,346.
And just for context, that 7.2% is for the older traditional rental stock. What about the new stuff, the unregulated market?
Oh, that market is much tougher. The condo rental market shows a tighter 2.1% vacancy rate, but the average rent there is, get this, $9,826.
Wow. That's a huge gap.
It's a nearly $500 difference. It means anyone who can stay in that older stock, they will. They'll do anything to stay, which creates this immense pressure.
So let's break that down. Why did the vacancy rate rise in the first place? A year ago, everyone was predicting it would drop below 1%.
Yeah.
What caused this detente, this softening?
It's really a dual effect. On the demand side, first, policies started to stabilize things. We saw a net slowdown in new temporary residents.
Right, the international students.
Mostly, yes. Federal and provincial policies limited those numbers, so that pressure cooker just released some steam. And second, on the supply side, a whole bunch of projects finally came through. The sheer volume of new housing completions, the lever is on, it finally hit the market.
These are the big towers we've been seeing go up for years.
Exactly. Projects started 3, maybe 4 years ago before the cost of financing construction just went wild. They all finished around the same time and, flooded the market with new units.
Okay, so that explains more supply and slightly less demand. That should mean prices go flat or even down. But we got a 7.2% rent hike. So why didn't the market behave? Doesn't 2.9% vacancy mean the crisis is easing up?
And this is the critical point. The increase is not driven by new tenants coming into the market. That's the usual driver of scarcity pricing.
So it's not the turnover.
No, it's the opposite. The dynamic has inverted. This increase is driven by adjustments to existing leases. The catalyst was a recommendation from the Provincial Tenancy Board, the Tribunal Administratif de Logement, or TOL. Because operational costs for owners have just exploded, insurance, taxes, mortgage rates, the TAL's recommendation for rent increases was a record 5.9%.
So a mandated 5.9% hike just to cover costs. This isn't about profit. It's inflation hitting the landlords.
Precisely. And then you look at the tenant side, the locataires. They're facing so much economic uncertainty, they see the sky-high rents on the open market, and they choose to just absorb that 5.9% increase.
Or even higher, probably.
Or they negotiate even higher just to avoid having to move, because if they move, they lose rent control and face that $1,800 market. The rotation rate is at a historic low.
So we've basically created a two-speed market that's dominated by inertia.
Yeah.
You have an official vacancy rate of 2.9%, but that number is, you're saying, heavily inflated by all these new, very expensive units? Luxury and salt, as one source put it. They're just sitting empty.
That's the perfect phrase for it. The crisis is still very real for low and middle income households because the affordable units, the ones they're in, they just aren't turning over. Availability is only increasing at the very top of the market.
Okay, let's take that present-day analysis and project it onto the city's future.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole metropolitan community is committed to this idea of building its way out of the crisis. We have to look at places like Ile-de-Serres, Nuns Island, now that it's fully connected by the new REM transit line.
The ambition there at IDS is just immense. It is a textbook case of what's called transit-oriented development, or TOD. The island's population right now is around 23,000. The new urban plan, the PPU, it aims to add about 4,000 new units.
4,000.
Yeah, which could push the population toward 30,000. That's a nearly 50% increase from what it was in 2016.
That's like dropping a small city onto an island that already feels pretty developed.
They're absolutely maximizing the infrastructure. The whole philosophy is built around that 6-minute commute downtown on the Rim. And to handle that volume, the PPU allows for some serious verticality. We're talking building heights from 12 up to 30 stories right near the station, which just continues that island's tradition of tall, modern architecture. I mean, you already have towers there, like Symphonia VIU pushing 43 stories.
And this all ties into the city's bigger blueprint, right? The PMAD 2026-2046. That's the master plan for the whole metro area. What are the key targets there?
The PMAD sets two really big non-negotiable targets. First, 309,900 new homes by 2046.
Wow.
That's the volume goal. Second, 70% of those homes have to be built near structured public transit. It's the official commitment to, compact growth. But here's where the tension really comes in. The plan also has this powerful social objective, a mandate that 20% of all new housing must be off-market.
Off-market, so social housing, co-ops.
Exactly. Social, affordable, cooperative models. They're trying to build both density and equity at the same time.
Which is a political tightrope walk, isn't it? You're demanding 300,000 new units, which relies on developer profit, while also demanding 20% of those units be the least profitable ones.
That's it. And the tension isn't just economic, it's environmental, especially when you go back to IDS. The island has this whole identity as a city in a park. It maintains 30–40% green space, including that critical 26-hectare Domaine St. Paul forest. So how do you square massive density with green preservation?
Yeah, the green space is always the first thing to get squeezed.
Well, the PPU tries to address this. It commits to creating 3.5 hectares of new green space to compensate for transforming old commercial areas and parking lots. But, the real challenge is making sure the quality of that new green space can absorb all the new people without damaging the priceless natural areas like the forest. And we should also look at the economic diversification plans, like for the post-industrial zones. There's this plan to create a central Quartier des Métiers data hub for professional artisans over by the Farine 5 Roses sign. It's a project that's projected to need $40 to $60 million just to get started.
That sounds like a great idea for revitalization, but what's the economic driver? Is it just culture?
It's about tourism and revenue. The goal is to give a permanent home to the artisan sector and attract those high-value tourists who spend, $85 to $150 a visit, not just $20 on a souvenir.
But anytime you revitalize an area like that, the ghost of gentrification is right there. The very artisans you want to attract could be priced out before the plan is even finalized.
And that is the crucial warning from the sources. This plan will only work if the city enforces really robust anti-speculation measures.
Like what?
Things like community land trusts to take land off the speculative market for good, or different tax policies for landlords who rent to certified creatives. You can't plan a creative economy and then let the market immediately displace the creators.
That's the perfect pivot, because that fragility links directly to the financial fragility of the working class. We've talked about the 7.2% rent hike, but what does that actually look like on the ground in neighborhoods already struggling? I'm thinking about food security in the southwest boroughs. Lachine, LaSalle, Verdun.
The reports from community organizations there are, frankly, deeply concerning. They're reporting a 20 to 30% surge in demand for food aid, and the people they're serving has completely changed.
It's not just the unemployed anymore.
Not at all. They are now regularly serving full-time workers, single-parent households, and seniors, people with jobs who just cannot afford the cost of living.
It sounds like the classic scissors effect. Costs rising way faster than wages. Do we have a specific breakdown of that squeeze?
We do. The data gives us this really stark picture using Le Sudouist. So Take a family with an average net income of about $4,500 a month. The average rent for a two-bedroom there is around $1,850.
Okay.
Now you add the cost for a basic nutritional grocery basket, not eating out, just
Mm.
food, which is about $1,425 a month.
So $8,850 plus $1,425. That's over $3,200.
It's $3,275, and that total consumes almost 75% of that average net income.
75%.
So if rent goes up or food prices climb, the only thing a household can cut is food, the quality or the quantity. That is why these community food banks, they're not just optional social services anymore. They are essential urban infrastructure.
And this brings us to what I think is the most jaw-dropping revelation in our sources, the invisible human engine that keeps this whole social net from just collapsing. We hear so much about the cost of an aging population, but this data suggests Montreal seniors are actually a massive, unpaid economic pillar for the whole region.
The contribution is staggering, and it's so systematically undervalued. The GMA has about 770,000 seniors, an astonishing 63% of them volunteer in some way.
63%.
That's nearly 500,000 people, 485,000 giving their time.
That's an incredible pool of labor. What does that break down to in actual hours?
Well, if we look at just the core formal volunteer group, about 200,000 seniors, they contribute 28 million hours a year.
28 million.
It averages out to 140 hours a year per person, which is almost double the contribution from younger volunteers. They bring expertise and time that working-age people just don't have.
So let's put a price tag on that. If the city had to hire people to do that work, what are we talking about?
Using a pretty prudent replacement rate of, say, $27.50 an hour, which reflects the specialized work they do from accounting to health support, that 28 million hours of unpaid labor is worth $770 million annually.
$770 million. That is an almost unthinkable subsidy to the city, provided for free.
It's colossal. To put it in perspective, that $770 million valuation is more than the entire annual budget for snow removal for the whole metropolitan area.
Wow.
These volunteers are the unbudgeted structural pillar. They serve on housing boards, run food banks, provide health support. Without them, social cohesion would just grind to a halt.
It just completely redefines urban resilience when you realize your safety net relies on altruism worth $750 million.
So before we wrap up, let's just briefly touch on one last point of urban space, how the city is managing the conflict between recreation and utility in the winter.
Yeah, we're seeing a shift toward specializing spaces. The Lachine Canal bike path, for instance, it used to be an informal spot for cross-country skiing.
Right.
Now it's fully cleared for four-season utility transport. It's a huge win for cyclists, but it displaces that recreation.
So the city has to compensate somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They do it by promoting sanctioned free ski networks. You've got 22 kilometers on Mount Royal, 10 at Maisonneuve. And it's worth noting, proximity to these big parks can add a 10 to 20% premium to property values. People will pay for that access to nature. And, of course, they keep investing in reliable skating. The shift to refrigerated rinks like Esplanade Tranquille, that guarantees a long season and brings hundreds of thousands of people downtown. So what does this entire deep dive tell us? The essential lesson, I think, for you, the listener, is this. The city's growth is accelerating. The PMAD, the RM, it's all happening. But the economic wealth from that growth is just not trickling down evenly. We have a rapidly expanding city alongside this deeply fragile middle class, shown by that 7.2% rent hike and the rising food insecurity.
The final synthesis is a really clear dichotomy. The city is very successfully building concrete new housing, transit lines, skyscrapers, but the real existential test is in protecting the human and natural infrastructure. You have to protect the Domaine St. Paul forest, you have to protect the artisans with anti-speculation measures, and most crucially, you have to find a way to stabilize this massive social safety net provided by the unpaid time of hundreds of thousands of seniors. That's the soft infrastructure that really determines if a city is livable.
So here's the final provocative thought for you to take with you, based directly on the sources. We know the PMAD requires billions for physical things, for trains and towers. But given that the GMA relies on $770 million in free, unpaid volunteer time every single year, more than the snow budget, what would happen practically if the city woke up tomorrow and had to actually budget for the social infrastructure that is currently free? That is the true measure of a city's actual operational cost and its long-term resilience. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.